Welcome to one and all. I am Vasanta, Department of Computer Science, Gopal Swami PU College, Mysore. Today we are going to start with the 6th session of Inheritance chapter. Already we explained regarding what do you mean by inheritance, the types, what are the advantages, how it will work, virtual class, abstract class, all those things in the previous session we explained. Now I am going to explain how this inheritance will work in constructor. If you have constructor in inheritance, exactly which one first it is going to execute, what are the main options here we have to follow, regarding that you will come to know on this session. How constructor will work in inheritance, that now you will come to know. Already I explained regarding what do you mean by inheritance, what do you mean by constructor as well as destructor. Once again I am to recall and then I am going to continue. Whereas inheritance is nothing but acquiring the properties from base class to derived class, or we can say it's creating a new class by using existing class. ಒಂದು ಹೊಸ ಕ್ಲಾಸನ್ನು ಕ್ರಿಯೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು, ಆಲ್ರೆಡಿ ಇರೋ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ನ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡು ಹೊಸ ಕ್ಲಾಸನ್ನು ಕ್ರಿಯೇಟ್ ಮಾಡೋದನ್ನು ನಾವು ಇನ್ಹೆರಿಟೆನ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ವಾಟ್ ಯು ಮೀನ್ ಬೈ ಕನ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಟರ್? Constructor is a special member function used to initialize the object of a class automatically. ಅಂದರೆ ಕನ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಟರ್ ಮೇನ್ ಆಗಿ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡೋದು ಇನಿಷಿಯಲೈಸೇಷನ್ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ. ಇನಿಷಿಯಲೈಸೇಷನ್ of an object, mainly these constructors are used. Constructor is a special member function used to initialize the object of a class automatically. Whereas destructor is also a special member function. This will automatically execute when you are going to destroy the object of a class. Constructor ಅಂದರೆ ನಾವು ಕಟ್ಟೋದು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದು, destructor ಅಂದರೆ ಹೊಡೆದಾಕೋದು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳೋದು. For example, in both base class, consider this is the base class and this is the derived class. Derived class. Base class and one more is derived class. In both the class, if you have constructor, how exactly it will going to execute? For example, constructor ಅಂದರೆ ಮನೆ ಅಂತ ನಾನು ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳಿದೆ. For example, I am going to take it as here, this is the base class. ಮನೆನ ನಾನು ಬೇಸ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೇನೆ. ದೆನ್ ಕಾಂಪೌಂಡನ್ನ ನಾನು ಡಿರೈವ್ಡ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀನಿ. ಡಿರೈವ್ಡ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್. ಫಾರ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್, ಮನೆ ಕಟ್ಟುವಾಗ ನಾವು ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಮನೆ ಕಟ್ತೀವ, ಕಾಂಪೌಂಡನ್ನು ಕಟ್ತೀವ? ಕಟ್ಟುವಾಗ ನಾವು ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಮನೆನ ಕಟ್ತೀವಿ. Then later on we will construct the compound. ಅಂದರೆ constructor ಇದ್ದರೆ ಫಸ್ಟು base class constructor it will going to execute. Then later on derived class constructor it will going to execute. ಅದೇ ಹೊಡೆದಾಕೋದು ಅಂದರೆ destructor. ಮನೆ ಹೊಡೆದಾಕುವಾಗ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಯಾವುದನ್ನ ಹೊಡೆದಾಕ್ತೀವಿ? ಫಸ್ಟು ಕಾಂಪೌಂಡನ್ನು ಹೊಡೆದಾಕ್ತೀವಿ. ಲೇಟರ್ ಆನ್ we have to destroy the home. ಹಾಗಂದ್ರೆ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ? ಡಿಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಟರ್ ಇದ್ದರೆ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಡಿರೈವ್ಡ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸಲ್ಲಿ ಎಕ್ಸಿಕ್ಯೂಟ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ದೆನ್ ಲೇಟರ್ ಆನ್ ಬೇಸ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸಲ್ಲಿ ಎಕ್ಸಿಕ್ಯೂಟ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಡಿಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಟರ್ ಇದ್ದರೆ. ಬಟ್ ಕನ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಟರ್ ಇದ್ದರೆ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಬೇಸ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಕನ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಟರ್ ಇಟ್ ವಿಲ್ ಗೋಯಿಂಗ್ ಟು ಎಕ್ಸಿಕ್ಯೂಟ್, ದೆನ್ ಲೇಟರ್ ಆನ್ ಡಿರೈವ್ಡ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಕನ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಟರ್ ಇಟ್ ವಿಲ್ ಗೋಯಿಂಗ್ ಟು ಎಕ್ಸಿಕ್ಯೂಟ್. ಕನ್ಸಿಡರ್ ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಬೋತ್ ಬೇಸ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಡಿರೈವ್ಡ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್. ಫಸ್ಟ್ ದ ಬೇಸ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಕನ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಟರ್. First base class constructor it will going to execute, then later on derived class constructor it will going to execute. If you have constructor both in base as well as in derived class, base ಮತ್ತೆ derived class ಎರಡರಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ constructor ಇದ್ದರೆ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಬೇಸ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಕನ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಟರ್ ಎಕ್ಸಿಕ್ಯೂಟ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, then later on derived class constructor it will going to execute. But when they come on destructor, then it is reverse wise. First the derived class destructor it will going to execute, later on the base class destructor it will going to execute. For example, in the base class, if you have parameterized constructor, if you have parameterized constructor, then it is compulsory, it is mandatory for a derived class to pass the argument to the base class. Argument, pass arguments to the base class constructor. It's a mandatory, it's a compulsory for a derived class to pass the necessary values to the base class, because first the base class constructor it has to execute. Base class execute ಆಗಬೇಕು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ necessary values ಏನಿದೆ ಅದು derived class ಇಂದ compulsory it has to pass. It's a monitor, it's a compulsory to pass the necessary values, arguments to the base class constructor if it is parameterized constructor. If it is not parameterized constructor, if it is not a parameterized constructor, then it is optional for the derived class to pass the arguments and all. Okay. If you have constructor in both base class and derived class, then base class first it will go to execute, then derived class constructor it will go to execute. If you have parameterized constructor in the base class, then compulsory the derived class constructor has to pass the necessary arguments to the base class constructor, then it execute. If it is not a parameterized constructor in the base class, then it is optional for the derived class to pass the values and it having constructor. Andre optional ಆಗಿರಬಹುದು, constructor ಇರೋದು ಕೂಡ optional ಆಗಿರಬಹುದು. And whenever it requires necessary values, it has to pass to the base class constructor. This I am going to explain with one example concept, then you will come to know what do you mean by constructor, how exactly it will work. First, consider we have a base class. How to create a base class? Base class. Consider it's a base class. In this we have constructor. How to write constructor? Compulsory it should be declared in public section, public, then base class function. Here we have arguments, initialization, then here we want to close the class. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಇದೆ, ಇದು ಬೇಸ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಇದ್ರ ಒಳಗಡೆ ನಂದು ಕನ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಟರ್ ಇದೆ. ಹೌ ಐ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಐಡೆಂಟಿಫೈ ದಿಸ್ ಅ ಕನ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಟರ್? ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ದ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ನೇಮ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಫಂಕ್ಷನ್ ನೇಮ್ ಆರ್ ಸೇಮ್. It should be declared in public section. It does not have any written type specifier, not even word also. From this I can identify this is a constructor. It's a base class and here it is a constructor function. One more I am creating, one more derived class I am creating by using the base class. Then how to write the derived class? Derived class. Then here we have to put colon. Public, the visibility mode here we have to write public. And what's the base class? Here I am going to take the base class is base class name. Base class. It means that here once if I am going to write public, the properties of base class are transferred to derived class. Here I am going to write one more constructor, especially here also once again you have to write public only, derived class function, derived class function. Then here whatever variable initialization you want you can initialize, then here close this class. See, here we are closed the base class and here we are closed the derived class. In the base class also we have constructor, in the derived class also we have constructor. How I come to know this is a constructor function? The derived class name as well as the function name both are same here. From that I can say that both in base class as well as derived class if you have constructor, then first this constructor it will go to execute, later on the derived class constructor it will go to execute. Now is it clear? If it is parameterized constructor in the base class, then for a derived class it's a compulsory, it's a mandatory to pass the necessary values to the base class. Now is it clear? If it is not a parameterized constructor in the base class, then it's optional for the derived class to pass the values. And whichever values it is required for the base class, the necessary values it has to pass to the base class. These are the few important things in the inheritance you have to come to know. Then on this chapter, you have studied regarding what do you mean by inheritance. Inheritance is the process of creating a new class by using existing class. What are the advantages? Because the last session, on this session I am to recall all the concept of this major chapter. When they come on advantages, advantages means here few advantages we have. The first advantages, the code can be reused. Whatever code for the base we have written, the same code we are reusing for the derived class. Obviously, the code can be reused. The time consumption is less because only one time we have to write the code for the base, the same code we are reusing. That's why obviously the time consumption will be less. As well as memory consumption is also very less here. ಮತ್ತೆ code ಬರಿ ಅವಶ್ಯಕತೆ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದಾಗ obviously memory ಕೂಡ reduce ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. Easy to maintain as well as easy to extend. These are the few advantages. Definition as well as advantage. Then which are the different types of inheritance we have? That is single level inheritance, multi-level inheritance, multiple inheritance, hierarchical inheritance as well as hybrid inheritance. 5 types: single level, multi-level, multiple, hybrid as well as hierarchical. These are the 5 types of inheritance. Then we are regarding how exactly this visibility mode will work. This visibility mode will controls mainly it controls the access specifiers, the members, the access specifiers of the base class in the derived class. Data members base class ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನೇನಿದೆ, functions ಏನೇನಿದೆ ಅದು ಆಕ್ಸೆಸ್ ಮಾಡಬಹುದಾ ಮಾಡಬಾರ್ದು ಅನ್ನೋದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ visibility mode ಹೇಳುತ್ತೆ. ಅಂದರೆ ಈ ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಆಲ್ರೆಡಿ ಹೇಳ್ತೆ ಟೋಟಲ್ weightage of this chapter is 5 marks. Total weightage of this chapter is 5 marks. Only one question you will get on the annual exam. The question may be what is inheritance? Write the advantage of inheritance. That one question you will get. Otherwise, what is inheritance? Explain the different types of inheritance. You will get. Otherwise, what is inheritance? Explain with an example program anta kuda kelbodu. Example program kuda kelbodu. Otherwise, what is inheritance? What is inheritance? Explain the visibility mode in inheritance anta kelbodu. What is inheritance? Explain the visibility mode in inheritance anta kelbodu. 4 questions. Otherwise, they will ask how this constructor as well as destructor will work in inheritance anta kelbodu. Constructor ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವ ತರ ವರ್ಕ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ as well as destructor ಅಲ್ಲಿ inheritance ಯಾವ ತರ ವರ್ಕ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಕೇಳಬಹುದು. Destructor both, if you have constructor in both base and derived class, then first base class it will go to execute, then derived class constructor it will go to execute. If you have destructor, then first which one it will go to execute? First the derived class destructor it will go to execute, then later on the base class destructor it will go to execute. Now is it clear? Then which are the remaining questions they are going to ask? What do you mean by abstract class, virtual class? ಅದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಿಮಗೆ ಕೇಳಬಹುದು. ಮೇಜರ್ ಆಗಿ ಈ ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವು ಕಲಿಬೇಕಾಗಿರೋದು ಯಾವುದು? ಡೆಫಿನೇಷನ್ ಗೊತ್ತಿರಬೇಕು, ಅಡ್ವಾಂಟೇಜ್ ಗೊತ್ತಿರಬೇಕು, ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್ ಗೊತ್ತಿರಬೇಕು, ವಿಸಿಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಮೋಡ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿರಬೇಕು. ವಿಸಿಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಮೋಡ್ ಕೂಡ 5 ಮಾರ್ಕ್ಸ್ ಕೇಳೋ ಕ್ವೆಶ್ಚನ್. ವಿಸಿಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಮೋಡ್, ದೆನ್ ಹೌ ದಿಸ್ in constructor as well as destructor will work in inheritance. ನಿಮಗೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಸಾರಿ ಎಕ್ಸಾಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಳಿರೋ ಕ್ವೆಶ್ಚನ್ explain different types of inheritance. On that time you have to explain the definition as well as all the types with figure you have to write. Figure ಬರ್ದಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಮಾರ್ಕ್ಸ್ ಕಳ್ಕೊಳ್ತೀರಾ. Now is it clear? Whereas when you come on working of inheritance, how constructor will work in inheritance ಅನ್ನುವಾಗ major points you have to remember is both in base class as well as derived class, if you have constructor, then first the base class, this it will go to execute. Then secondly it will go to execute in the derived class. Now is it clear? If you have destructor, for destructor how we are going to write? The same pattern of constructor only, but there we have tiled operator. Tiled operator irutte. ಈಗ for example this is a constructor. Here only I am to write one more thing. Here I am to write, for example, tiled operator, base class, empty bracket, here I am to open and here I am to close. Then destructor idre, then first destructor function will execute in the derived class, later on in the base class it is going to execute. Here also I am to write the destructor. For example, before the class name, before this class name, that is especially before the function, you have to write the tilde operator, that is derived class, empty bracket, here I am open and here I am to close. Then if you have destructor, then first derived class destructor is going to execute, later on the base class destructor is going to execute. Are constructor annuvaga first base class execute agutte, then later on derived class execute agutte. Now is it clear? This is very important concept on this chapter. On this chapter you have to study regarding inheritance. On inheritance you may going to get a question, base class andre enu, derived class antandre enu anta kelbodu. Inheritance is the process of acquiring the properties from base class to derived class. Then what do you mean by base class? The base class is nothing but the existing class. Derived class is nothing but a new class. Advantages: memory reduces, time reduces, as well as code can be reused, easy to maintain, easy to extend. These are the advantage. Then regarding virtual class, what do you mean by abstract class? Otherwise, what do you mean by visibility mode? How exactly this visibility mode will work in base class as well as in derived class. Data members base class alli enidre derived class alli enagutte adu annodra bagge ನೀವು explain ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. Study regarding what do you mean by inheritance. Inheritance is nothing but creating a new class by using existing class. New class means it's a child class. Existing class is nothing but a parent class. Then advantages anta heluvaga, code can be reused. Parents ke code bariyodunna songe ನಾವು as it is properties na acquire ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, code can be reused, no need to write once again. Obviously code can be reused ಅಂದಾಗ time consumption is also reduces. Time consumption reduces. Then obviously time reduce ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, memory is also reduced here. The same memory can be, the memory mainly here we can reduce, easy to maintain, easy to extend. Now is it clear? Then program ಹೇಳುವಾಗ ನಾನು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದೆ, ಒಂದೇ ಒಂದು program explain ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೆ, that is regarding marks as well as the student. Regarding that we explain the program. It's a 5 marks question. In the exam they are going to ask, what do you mean by inheritance? Explain with a program anta kuda kelbodu. Then regarding virtual class, what do you mean by virtual base class? To avoid the duplication, to avoid the duplication of the same class, we are making the base class as virtual class. Base class na virtual anta ಮಾಡೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ನಾವು duplicate ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ avoid ಮಾಡೋದು. Duplication of the same data can be avoided. For example, if you have a class A, then B, then one more class from this D, C, then one more class from this D. Here derived class D, here it takes the properties from A, B and then D. Once again from here also it is derived A, C and then D. Here the D have the same copy of A. To avoid this we are making the base class as virtual. Duplication avoid ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಏನು ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ, ನಾವು ಬೇಸ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸನ್ನ ವರ್ಚುವಲ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಅಂತ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋತೀವಿ. Then what do you mean by abstract class? Abstract class, by using that especially this abstract class is not used to create the object of a class. Object ಇಂದ ಕ್ರಿಯೇಟ್ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡೋದಿಲ್ಲ, ಅದರ ಬದಲಾಗಿ it acts as a base class only. By using that I can able to create derived class. That is regarding abstract class. Virtual class ಅನ್ನೋದು, virtual base class ಅನ್ನೋದು ಯಾವುದಕ್ಕೆ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ, ಡೂಪ್ಲಿಕೇಟ್ ಅವಾಯ್ಡ್ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ virtual base class ಅನ್ನು ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. Abstract class ಅನ್ನುವಾಗ this is not used to create the object of a class, but it used as a base class to create one more derived class. Then I explained regarding especially the visibility mode. This visibility mode will control the access specifiers of the members of the base class in the derived class. Base class aliro members na access ಮಾಡಬಹುದಾ, ಮಾಡಬಾರ್ದಾ, ಮಾಡೋದ್ರೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ explain ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಯಾವುದು visibility mode. There also you'll get 3 types. One is private visibility, public as well as protected. private, public, protected. There also I explained one table. If you know the table, then easily you can write the answer for that question. Then the major things regarding how this constructor will work in constructor as well as in destructor. That also they may going to ask for 5 marks. Both base class and derived class ಎರಡರಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ constructor ಇದ್ರೆ ಯಾವ ತರ ವರ್ಕ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. Both base class as well as derived class, if you are destructor, how exactly it will work. That also you have to come to know in this chapter. Whereas on this chapter constructor idre ಎರಡರಲ್ಲೂ base, consider this the base and this the derived. Base derived ಎರಡರಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ constructor idre first base execute ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, then derived ಅಲ್ಲಿ execute ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. Destructor ಇದ್ದಾಗ first derived class execute ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, later on base class destructor it will going to execute. I think you come to know the major concept of this inheritance chapter. You have to know the program. The remaining thing is only the program that you have to know. Then only you can be able to answer for this question. Now is it clear? Next class we'll meet with a new chapter. Thank you for all of you.